In today's Drawing and Adobe Illustrator tutorial, you will learn how to create flat style characters with Christmas tree. First, I will teach you to draw your own interesting and live flat style characters, and then you will see how to redraw your artwork in Illustrator. I will guide you through the most effective and professional methods to add noise texture. You will learn how to work with opacity mask, clipping mask, freeform gradient, blending modes, shear tool, shape builder tool, and even 3D effects. By the end of this tutorial, you will know how to draw your own flat style characters and will be able to create amazing illustrations with rich grain texture. You are watching TNT tutorials? Let's move on! First of all, don't put pressure on the pencil and don't hold it like a pen. Don't draw like this. Relax your hand. Place sheet of paper or sketchbook in front of your eyes. Even if you will draw in other positions, your hand should be relaxed and you must be able to easily draw long and free lines. Movement should start from your shoulder, then go through your arm to the pencil. It's good to start with drawing movements. Draw flowing and dancing lines, nothing but them. After this, simply adjust character's body to these movements. Each detail should lay on that flowing lines. The last step is details. Keep flat style character minimalistic. Later you will add interesting noise and shadows in Illustrator, so concentrate on overall look and make sure that character looks live and you can easily read his pose. As you can see, I don't measure any proportions. That's because I concentrate on playful lines, not on human anatomy. Just keep in mind structure that fits this style. Small head, short torso and big legs. Concentrate on this game of shapes. Try to bring special mood to your flat style character, so it won't look like hundreds of others. Yes, he has the same proportions as all others, but you must be able to say that this one is kind, this one is happy, and so on. And you can say it right on first step, when you're drawing lines. It takes a few seconds for you to understand that this pose will work for you, so don't hesitate to experiment. You can also always erase and change anything. It's easy to do when you don't put pressure on the pencil. Don't work with character for too long. Try to draw this character in different pose. Maybe you will like it much more. And it's a matter of seconds, so don't hesitate to draw more and don't be afraid to fail. You can see how I draw sketch for today's Christmas illustration. I start with composition and make light marks of all objects in this scene. At this stage you can already see if composition works, so you don't need to make all lines bold and visible to understand that. The most important is mood. And in this case, mood is created with poses. Everything else is details. Don't add too many details, keep illustration look minimalistic and balanced. Walk a few steps back from your artwork and look at it from distance. This can help you to make illustration better. Now it's time to work in Illustrator. We will redraw sketch with pen tool and add stunning grain texture. You can watch how I draw sketch full screen on my Instagram page. Select Print, A4, Horizontal Orientation. In Advanced Options select RGB and click on Create. You can download reference, colors and sketch by the link in the video description. To place colors and sketch here, click here on File, Place and find path to downloaded material. To zoom in and to zoom out, hold Alt and use Scroll. To navigate through workspace, hold spacebar and navigate like this. First of all, let's trace this sketch with pen tool. Select Sketch, Properties. Let's decrease opacity to 40%. Lock this layer. Create new layer. I will rename it to Christmas. I for eyedropper tool. I will pick this color. Let's bring Christmas layer down, behind sketch layer. Click here to swap fill and stroke. P for pen tool. I will show you the most important things that you will need to know. Drag handles from first point. Don't create too many points. You can do it quickly with pen tool, don't be too precise. To make sharp corner, hold Alt and move handle. Hold space to navigate. Alt for sharp corner, connect these points, and after this, A for direct selection tool, play with handles, move points. If you want to add point, P for pen tool, click on line, then A for direct selection tool, and play with handles. To delete point, P for pen tool again, and click on point that you want to delete. If you don't have handles on some points, select this point with direct selection tool, properties, convert selected anchor points to smooth, then hold Alt if you need to make sharp corner, and move handles. Absolutely in the same way, you should trace each object in this scene. Sometimes you have some complicated curvy objects. You can quickly trace them with pen tool, using only sharp corners. Then don't switch to direct selection tool, hold Alt, and adjust lines. After this, A for direct selection tool. If you don't want sharp corner, convert selected anchor point to smooth, play with handles. Sometimes you might want to simply pick point and drag this dot. You can also select a few points and round them like this. When you need to trace ellipse, L for ellipse tool, hold Shift to draw ellipse. You can also hold spacebar. You will have holded Shift, spacebar, and left mouse button. Move ellipse, then release left mouse button, V for selection tool, hold Shift, and play with proportions. If you want to trace rectangle, M for rectangle tool, draw rectangle. If you don't want sharp corners, drag these dots. I'll press Ctrl Z. You might want to use dots only for these 2 points. Then select these 2 and drag dots just a little. Let's drag these handles. Use Smart Guides, see this pink line, hold Shift. Then, to connect these points with sharp corner, hold Alt and connect them. A for direct selection tool and play with handles. Then select these objects and rotate them. Don't trace ladder. I will show you how to quickly create it using 3D effect. After you will trace all objects, you should have this picture. As you can see, I traced each object. It's time to apply colors. Simply pick needed objects, I for eyedropper tool, and apply colors according to reference, one by one. I decided to move on with final result. Don't worry, right now you will learn a lot of amazing stuff. Let's pick this object for example. We have a lot of layers here, and we want to pick this object, but we select all unneeded layers. In this case, I have background layer here, and I placed these shapes to this layer. So let's simply lock this layer, and now we can easily select these objects. As you can see, you don't even need to group it, but you can group it if you want. So I will duplicate it here, duplicate it again. Here's how you can create such objects. You can see this layer here, this layer with texture. You can use this amazing texture in different ways. Right now I will show you how to create it. And we have this layer. Right after you adjusted color for your artwork, you will need to pick object, press Ctrl C, Ctrl F to make a copy. To increase thumbnail view, click here, panel options. Let's select other, 100 pixels. I did it for you just to see better. Right now we have original layer and copied layer. Let's select original layer. I will hide copied layer. And for this original layer, let's pick dark color. Now let's make this layer visible. Select it. Click here on Window, Transparency. This window might appear somewhere here. Don't drag it to this panel. Drag it here. With this object selected, click here on Make Mask. Then click here on Clip. To enter mask mode, click on this icon. We're in mask mode. You can't pick anything else in this mode. You can see that in layers we see only opacity mask layers. So let's press M for rectangle tool, draw huge rectangle. It can be any color, don't worry about that, simply huge rectangle. Then with this rectangle selected, gradient, and let's pick freeform gradient. I recommend you to use freeform gradient to create textures almost in each case when you create such artworks. I use linear gradient and radial gradient only in some specific moments, because you don't have enough freedom to adjust texture using linear and radial gradient. So, freeform gradient, select points. Now let's pick this point, hold Shift, this point also. I just show you that you can pick a few points using holded Shift. Let's press Delete and delete them. Then double-click on this point, click here on Color, and pick white color here. Then double-click on this point, and pick black color. Also pay attention that you should be in RGB mode, because if you will be in CMYK mode and you will pick black color in CMYK mode won't be as rich as in RGB. We need rich black color, so RGB mode, rich black color, and move these points like this. Nothing special for now. You can press V for selection tool, but this rectangle should be selected. As you can see, I selected this rectangle, Effect, Texture, Grain. Right here, Grain should be selected, because we picked Grain, obviously. You should watch at this window. In some cases you need strong noise, in some cases not. I usually use only regular and stippled grain types, so stippled or regular. Right now I will show you how you can easily and quickly switch between these grain types after you will apply some of them. For regular type, I usually use these values, strong intensity and strong contrast. I will click OK. Now press G for gradient tool, move these points, and you can see that you can easily adjust texture. But this is not all. If you want to create another black point, click on black point and simply create new black point. If you want to create white point, click on white point and then create white point. Now what you should notice, that you can use this tip for all objects. You create layer, duplicate this layer, adjust dark color for original layer, then select copied layer, create opacity mask. In opacity mask you create huge rectangle, then you apply freeform gradient to this rectangle, rich black and white colors, effect, texture, grain, play with values, and you get this incredible result. Let's continue. Let's open gradient panel. Let's switch two lines. Select this point and connect it with this one. We don't want straight line here. Let's simply create another point and drag it like so. If you don't want to create lines anymore and you want to simply manipulate points, you should switch to points mode. This will make your life easier, believe me. So switch to points, move these ones, you can increase radius for some points. You can also pick some points. Let's click here on swatches and pick some gray color, for example. And you can see what result can you get. It's not as dark here as it was. I will adjust black color here again. So after you applied texture, you might want to make it softer or change it to stippled from regular. Select rectangle with this noise, properties, click here on applied effect. Let's switch to stippled. When I use stippled, I usually use low contrast and play with intensity. Sometimes I use strong intensity and sometimes middle intensity, something like this, just to leave some light noise here. Don't worry about these black parts. I will click OK. And you can see that you have absolutely different results. So it's up to you to decide which one to choose for this illustration. I used combination of regular type, stippled type, and I played with intensity, almost for each object. I'll press Ctrl Z. Now we want to continue, but we're in mask mode and we can't pick anything. That's why we have transparency panel here. Let's simply switch to layer mode. Click here. And you have all these layers here. Let me show you this ellipse that we edited right now. You can see this great effect. You can see through all this noise. So you can use this tip in different cases. To release opacity mask, simply click here on Release, and you will have this object. You can simply delete it, and you will have your ellipse untouched. Let's continue. L for ellipse tool. Let's create another ellipse. This ellipse is not white. I use standard color from color palette that you can download. Make mask, clip. Let's enter this mask mode. Click here on this icon. We're in mask mode. Right now we will use linear gradient, and when we use linear gradient or radial gradient, we don't need to create huge rectangle. You can create any rectangle you want, like this for example, then gradient, linear gradient, G for gradient tool, play with gradient direction, and you can see that this shape becomes invisible closer to black point. Play with this slider. I'll press V for selection tool. You can see that this ellipse is not as bright as this one. Let's change it. Let's switch to layer mode. Click here. With this ellipse selected, I mean this one, that we have created right now, properties, opacity, blending modes, and let's pick screen. You can see that it's much brighter now. Let's pick it again and decrease opacity. So let's create another ellipse, rotate it, properties, let's adjust screen blending mode, let's just leave 100%, A for direct selection tool. Let's play with these points. I will leave this result. Let's select this object, make mask, clip, enter mask mode, M for rectangle tool. In this case, we will use linear gradient also, so we don't need to create huge rectangle. We need to create huge rectangle when we use freeform gradient. Gradient, linear gradient, G for gradient tool, play with gradient direction, play with sliders, then V for selection tool, and I will return to usual mode. Alright, here you go. When you will create such illustrations, you will have hundreds of layers, but I feel absolutely comfortable with them. When you need to find layer that behind this layer, for example, we can't pick it, we can't see it. First thing that you can do, you can select both layers, hold Shift, click on top layer. As you can see, I picked needed layer, or you can simply pick visible layer, layer that is on top of needed layer, and click here on locate object. I use this feature all the time. Alright, and we can pick needed layer. We can make this layer invisible for now, use this layer, and then make this layer visible again. Let's click on this opacity mask, select rectangle inside of opacity mask, G for gradient tool, and as you can see, it's very easy to manipulate noise and shadow using freeform gradients. You can't do this with linear or radial gradients. I used radial gradient for this background shape. I used it here. You can see simple black shape. I will release opacity mask. You can see black ellipse with applied opacity mask. I'm in opacity mask mode. G for gradient tool, gradient. You can see that I'm using radial gradient here. You can click here to reverse gradient. You can play with proportions of linear gradient, like this. Reverse it again. Let's return to usual mode, and don't forget that this shape is transparent also. Right here, as you can see, I used opacity mask to create shadows. Here it is. I can move it like this. To release it, right-click, release clipping mask. Here's how you can easily apply it. Let's pick this darker color. P for pen tool. Simply draw shape like this. Don't worry about this shape. You should create it very fast, because later you will edit it anyway. Then you have two ways to create clipping mask. Let's make a copy. I will show you first way. Select this object, bring it up. Here is key combination to quickly bring needed layer on top of all layers. Shift Ctrl plus right brackets. Then select these two layers, right click, make clipping mask. After this, A for direct selection tool, pick this shape, I for eyedropper tool, and adjust needed color. Then simply manage layers as you need. After this, A for direct selection tool, pick shape that is inside of clipping mask and adjust it as you want. This is very easy and fast to do. Now second way to adjust clipping mask. Let's pick this object. Right now we need to press Ctrl C, Ctrl Shift V. When we press Ctrl Shift V, we automatically place copy on top of all layers. Now let's select these two layers, right click, make clipping mask. I use this method when I know that I won't need to edit anything. I will simply adjust shape inside of clipping mask, and that's all. But when I know that I'm not sure about shape, I use first method, because with first method you can change shape and then adjust shape that is inside of clipping mask easily, like this. You can't do it in this case. You want to change shape, and you can see what is going on, because this is two different shapes. So it's up to you which method to use. You should definitely know them both, because in most cases I use this method when I have two shapes. Let me show you opacity mask in this case. Let's enter opacity mask mode. Let's pick this rectangle. It's huge, because we use freeform gradient here. G for gradient tool. You can see that I have two black points here and two white points here. I can move them all around and play with shadow. Also, don't forget that you can always change grain effect. As you can see, I use stippled grain type here. Take a look at these values. Let's change them to regular. Increase contrast. Click OK. You can see that regular is much softer than stippled. So it's up to you which grain to choose. I recommend you to experiment and try different textures. You should see which texture will work for you the best. What I can recommend you is that when you want to see texture from distance, you should use stippled texture. I used stippled texture for this shape. As you can see, I'm zooming out and I can see it. Some shapes should have strong texture and some shapes not. Remember that we used regular texture here. I used stippled texture here. G for gradient tool. I love to play with freeform gradient. It gives really great results. And I used regular texture here. Also, if you enter opacity mask mode, you press G for gradient tool because you want to edit your gradient, and nothing happens. This might be for two reasons. First reason, you didn't pick rectangle where you applied gradient. Now let's press G and we can edit it. Second reason, you have stroke selected. If you have stroke selected, you won't be able to use gradient tool. As you can see, I press G and nothing happens. So select fill, press G, and everything will work for you. Now let me show you how to quickly create ladder. Let's pick line segment tool, draw line, let's increase stroke weight, duplicate it. Here is hotkey to create line. Let's create another line, V for selection tool. When you want to adjust it to your character, press Ctrl plus R, drag guides here and here. Move this line like this, hold Alt plus Shift, drag it to this guide, release all buttons, and press Ctrl plus D. Then you can delete these guides, select all these lines, move them up, and here you go. Now with all these lines selected, Object, Expand, OK, Pathfinder, Unite. Now this is one object, Effect, 3D, Extrude and Bevel, Preview. Let's start with front position, rotate this box just as I do, adjust needed degree, play with extrude depth. I think I will use this value. After you adjusted needed degree, in surface select no shading, click OK, Object, Expand appearance. After this layers, you can see that we have group inside of group. We don't need this. Right click, ungroup. After this you will need to apply textures and shadows to this object, and to do this, find this layer. You can see that it's grouped also, and remember that you need to ungroup it just as we did with all this group. So select this group, right click, ungroup, and after this you will be able to adjust textures and shadows as I showed you. Create copy, original layer, dark color for original layer, and so on. Make mask, gradient, as we already did. After this, select this shape, hold Shift, deselect these two layers, then you can press A for direct selection tool, deselect these layers also. You can see what layers we selected. Let's adjust darker color for them, then pick these layers and adjust brighter color. Here you go. You can see that there's something wrong with this ladder. That's because in the beginning, when you will create it, you should press A for direct selection tool, select this point and move it. After this, make copy, flip along horizontal axis, then create lines. You can create them like so, then Shift plus M for shape builder, hold Alt, delete everything that is unneeded, all unneeded parts, and after this apply 3D effect, ungroup all groups inside of groups, change colors, and adjust textures. Also you should know about shear tool. You can use it even after you will expand 3D shape. Here it is, shear tool, hold Shift, and change object like this. If you don't know how to create star, here's how you can do it. Star tool, click somewhere on the workspace, 5 points, click OK, then Object, Path, Offset Path, Preview, -1, click OK. For this copied star, opacity, screen for example, make mask, clip, mask mode, M for rectangle tool, linear gradient, black and white, G for gradient tool, change transparency, then return to usual mode. Let's select this shape, Ctrl C, Ctrl Shift V, and with this shape you can adjust texture. It will be transparent and will be applied just as you can see here. I think that for beginners this tutorial might seem hard, but I want to encourage you to experiment and work. You will never get good results without practicing. So just watch this tutorial and repeat all that I showed you step by step. After this, you can use all knowledge from this tutorial, draw your own characters. Maybe you would like to draw some simple scene, begin with one character, some easy object, apply shadows with all the methods that I showed you today, and then move on with something more complicated. This is the only way to become true professional and experienced illustrator. If you learned something new from this tutorial, drop a comment below. Let me know if everything was clear enough for you and what you liked about this video. If you enjoyed this tutorial, support this channel by clicking on subscribe, and what's most important, by clicking on the bell icon to get notifications about newest tutorials from TNT. I would also appreciate if you will click thumbs up and will share this video. This was TNT Tutorials. See you in next videos!